The views and opinions expressed by the guests and hosts of this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Lansdowne Public Library or its affiliates.
Welcome to the Lansdowne Public Library's Geek Out podcast,
where we geek out about just about anything.
It is a very special anniversary coming up, so it's the perfect time for us to talk about The Princess Bride.
It's worth noting that the book is celebrating its 50th anniversary. The movie's not quite that old, thankfully. I feel old enough as it is without that suddenly being a realization.
We are joined once again by wonderful librarian here, Brad.
Pleased to be here again.
And, of course, Alex, welcome back.
Hello. Good to be back.
All right, so I'd say show of hands, but I guess
that doesn't really work.
It's an audio program.
Yeah, audio medium. All right, chime
Sound
in.
off.
Who has actually read the book?
I have been skimming through I believe it was the 25th anniversary edition that we have here at the Lansdowne Public Library available for checkout. Skimming through that, but officially cover to cover, I have not read the book.
This will sound as a poor start to our podcast because I haven't read it either, but I have read similarly bits and pieces and I've read summaries. Doesn't mean that we can't be fans and we can't geek out about the stuff.
I actually have read the book, although it's been a while. I know that it's been a while because my copy of the book was the 30th anniversary, so that book is at least 20 years old.
Well, no time like the present. Fall's rolling in, and one thing I'm always thinking about when the fall comes around, at least now more than ever, is the Renaissance Fair and whatnot.
Yeah.
So put the sort of beach behind and get out
your
those,
suit of armor.
Get the suit of armor and those giant turkey legs. So, Princess Bride. So I guess we'll start with, I'm assuming since few of us have read the book, everybody else has seen the film.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Many more times than I can count.
Yeah.
Definitely numerous times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Just to set the face of familiarity here. When did you guys first see the film? Do you remember when you first watched it, or?
I remember first watching it on TV when I was probably 7 or 8, right around the time it was released on TV. I remember watching it again as many times as I could as a little kid. It was first time.
I don't clearly remember the first time because I was so young, but that's kind of the point of this movie is I watched it as a very, very small child and just kept coming back to it, kept wanting to introduce it to my friends and to more people and found everybody else had seen it and everybody else loved it, and so it was just something that's always been a part of the culture around me.
I feel like I saw it later in life than everyone else seems to have, even though it's thankfully a bit older than I am. Yeah, my family just sort of missed this one. It wasn't until I was maybe 10 or 11 that a buddy of mine basically forced me to watch it because he told me the title and I do not like the sound of this being a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
My thoughts were very quickly mimicked by the child in the film, as it turns out.
You're Fred Savage, you just didn't know it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had the exact same experience, again, with the kid, like, what is this? But I remember, like, my parents were like, all right, movie night, we're watching this, and just being like a DVD, and like, all right, I guess we're watching this.
Yeah. My requirements as a child were very limited. They were just, it had to be in color, and then I was okay with it, so...
Oddly, somehow higher than my standard for film. I did not have that requirement.
And I'm not saying anything about my age, but I watched it for the first time on a black and white TV.
Hey. It's not one of those, it's not like a color is not a big feature of it. Great, but I don't think you lose anything from black and white.
Not at all.
I'm kind of curious now. I might have to try watching it in a...
Yeah, see how it works out.
I'll have to see if I can finagle something in a media player to make that happen.
Yeah. I'm sure you can find some sort of filter somewhere.
VLC has to, right?
I'd imagine.
Or like maybe a filter plug-in, something.
Yeah. Oh, there has to be.
So, what do y'all like about The Princess Bride? Let's get into it.
For me, my draw was Andre the Giant. Being a childhood wrestling fan, as soon as I see a movie with a wrestler in it, I was there. And it just happened to be Andre the Giant, and it was awesome. That was my tie-in. My favorite parts as a kid were the Andre the Giant parts, of course. And then I took probably a 15, 20-year gap between watching it and then getting ready for what we have done recently and digging into it. And I'm finding more parts that, as an adult, I'm enjoying more than the Andre the Giant parts. Just the interplay between different characters. But my initial draw were those Fezzik parts.
Just curious, did you get offended at all that Wesley out-wrestles Andre the Giant? Because I had that problem sometimes when I knew that there was a wrestler and it's like, who's this guy who's supposed to be beating him?
As a kid, I was.
Yeah.
I was, but yeah, there was definitely some of that. But at the same time, at that point, if I remember correctly, he was a bad guy, so I was like, go ahead, take care of it.
Got stuck playing the heel a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Never did it. He never really felt like a heel, though.
Mm-hmm.
He's just kind of naturally likable, that guy.
Exactly. And reading through the anniversary book, the book included chapters about events that happened after the Princess Bride story itself. And one that kind of caught my attention was titled The Death of Fezzik. And he dies by throwing himself into a cliff, trying to catch Buttercup's baby. Mm. And I had no idea, as a kid, that was part of it. And even before we started this whole thing with the reading, I'd never known it. And that added a different layer to everything that he did and everything that he said. So it's kind of one of those, dig back into it as an adult, you get a whole lot more.
For those who don't know, the author tried to write a sequel at various points throughout his life, and he did write several chapters of this proposed sequel, which he called Buttercup's Baby. He actually said that he would have it ready by the 50th anniversary of the first book. However, he has died, and even before he died, he said that there was no way he could write a sequel to Princess Bride. There are, though, for those who are interested, the first few chapters out there. The very first chapter is titled Fezzik Dies. However, it might be just clickbait, if you will. His notes on it say, so Fezzik doesn't die in that chapter, and it's kind of playing with time, going back and forth and kind of saying that, like, is he going to die? Kind of like holding it over the reader. So a bit kind of like Wesley's death. Does he die, or is he just mostly dead? But we'll never know, because he didn't finish it.
I suppose it is nice to know that somebody took longer to get finished a sequel than frickin' George R. R. Martin.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I feel like that may have lost a lot of steam due to the poor reception.
Well, see, now he knows what not to do.
Yeah,
exactly.
So
there is value.
That is the benefit of that.
I'm honestly thinking of that. Kind of surprised nobody has tried to do a film sequel or remake. It seems to be all I see anymore is sequels to movies that are older than I am, or remakes of films.
Yeah.
Or superheroes, which I'm fine with, but I hear a lot of people are less thrilled with these days.
I'd like to hear what everyone else thinks, but when I think of a perfect movie, Princess Bride is kind of that movie.
I'd say it's on a list of a few movies. Like, I could put in the Lord of the Rings trilogy on there, where it's like, there are certainly things that could be improved, but I don't know that I would want anybody to try.
Yeah. That is definitely reasonable.
It feels like everything is touchable, but it feels like one of those things that should be untouchable.
Fingers crossed. I'm sure some executive somewhere right now is thinking about it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Maybe not right now, since they don't have writers or actors.
Well,
yeah, I'd like to see him try.
Although, actually, that would be kind of interesting to see somebody try and do an animated version of this.
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
You would have more options. There's the debate, too, like, do you want to try to go more faithful to the book? Because a lot of changes were made. Not huge changes. The most significant, really, is just getting rid of the Zoo of Death from the book, which kind of cascade a bunch of changes, because a lot revolved around that in the book. First of all, animated, that would lend itself to doing a bunch of animals and such.
It's a lot easier to get that to work.
But I don't even know, like, that adding that whole extra arc is necessary for a movie.
It could be that thing like they're doing with Star Wars now, where they're taking little pieces of the whole lore and making a whole series out of it. I was watching a couple of interviews with Billy Crystal, and he said that his idea for the Miracle Max and Valerie characters, he wanted them to have a whole series, a whole spinoff, just on them, of what happened to them after the events of the Princess Bride, but what happened before and how they got there. Because the lines allude to a lot of things happening that are never mentioned. As far as the book, I don't know, but at least in what everyone knows from the movie, they're not touched. It might be interesting to explore, especially animated, because you could go anywhere with it.
Yeah.
If they did that, it would have to be a narration, like almost like Max retelling it, and maybe playing with,
just his perspective of it. So.
Maybe thinking some things and embellishing it, and maybe having Valerie also there to correct or
Grandpa versus kid, Max versus Valerie. Set it up, like frame it.
Yeah,
the Princess Bride.
Yeah, that could work.
That could be fun.
Yeah. You gotta get them back, though. Since I will not accept anybody.
I feel like that is part of the big problem, is like, who do you recast several of these people with? It's the closest thing we've had to Andre the Giant for a while has been the Big Show. He's up in years now as well.
Yeah. And so there have been a whole bunch of online fan castings of what a sequel or a remake would be. And a lot of them mention the Big Show, but I don't even think, because
he's nowhere near as big as
Andre was 7'4", and to recast that just wouldn't look right.
Again, unfortunately, passed away, but the guy that played Hagrid often came to my mind. Although I'm not sure that he's even that tall.
He's also dead.
Yeah, passed fairly recently.
That's what. Yeah. No, I don't think he was tall at all. I think he was actually short.
Was he?
Maybe it was just he always looked... Yeah, I guess that's true, because every time I think of seeing him, I'm seeing him next to teenagers and kids, really. He just always seemed like a looming presence.
Well, if you think about it, he really... I mean, with that costume, they did just sort of make him look wider, which might just also allude to, he's big, but...
Yeah. I mean, then that's the thing. You could try and do something similar with making somebody look larger than they are.
Stand on this milk crate.
Yeah. Everyone else is acting in a ditch. It's fine.
First Hobbit thing.
Yeah.
I mean, stuff like that's been done, and it's been done well. So
unfortunately, nowadays it would just be some CGI monstrosity. But,
Probably, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like you could probably get, like, I don't know, a football player or something to do it.
Yeah. There's definitely, like, Andre the Giant's acting wasn't exactly the best. It was passable. It was perfect for what he was playing.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of that is kind of a perfect cast, though, isn't it? Because he doesn't need the character. Fezzik doesn't need to be grand. No. Really, he's actually a very humble kind of character.
Yeah, doesn't need to be eloquent.
Just has to be able to rhyme
most of the time.
I'd say Jason Kelsey as the next Fezzik.
Again, not quite tall enough, but I'd love to see it, just because the guy is about that same level of weirdly lovable that Andre the Giant was, especially in this area. I'm sure Patriots fans have very different opinions, but, well, I don't really care for their opinions.
No, this podcast would not do well with mine, so...
And again, if he's not tall enough, he can have new effects that weren't available then, or that were available, like different angles and shots.
Yeah. That can be to both a detriment and improvement here and there, depending.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say, of course. One studio will give you some spectacular special effects, and then that same studio for another film will have rushed the crew and it'll look terrible.
Yeah.
We've theorized a bit on what it would look like if somebody were to try to remake it. But for now, I think the hope is, just don't, please.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, let's move back a bit to the original, the only, thankfully.
Please.
What are everyone's, favorite characters, really? We talk about what made the movie so important. Who would you say is your favorite out of the bunch? I mean, in your case, is it still Fezzik?
It's not. For the longest time, and I struggled with it up until 2 years ago, I view the movie as very chapter-based.
Yeah.
And for me, I could not get, like, once the Battle of Wits was done, movie was over. Like, I couldn't focus. My attention couldn't get me past that hump. But getting ready for the reading that we did, I watched the movie probably 15 times, I think, to just ingest it. Mm. And I still love the lines, I still love the character, but the Montoya character, who I couldn't stand as a kid, love that character now. So if you strip all the comedy away, strip all the campy, all the goofy away, you have a beautiful revenge vengeance story from start to finish. And it's great. So that's kind of where I'm at now, really looking at that. That's my favorite part right now. Yeah. Just seeing how everything plays out. And he finally gets it. Something happens good for him.
I would probably agree as for favorite character with Inigo. You know, heroes are often accentuated by their villains, and Count Rugen, as opposed to Humperdinck, is much more of a compelling villain, I think. Humperdinck, I don't mean to put him down, but he serves his purpose, but he is kind of the stereotypical pompous prince.
He's more a plot device than a character.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of that could also be said of Buttercup.
Both of them are weaklings in terms of character, but Count Rugen, it's easy enough to miss a lot of his character in early viewings, especially as a child. But when you really think about it, again, when I was looking at, we did a reading recently, which is what Brad was talking about, where we were playing the different characters, and one of Count Rugen's lines, where he's like, I'm fascinated by pain and I'm trying to create the definitive work on human suffering. And it's just like, this is a crazy character. He's completely sadistic, and he's studying human pain, and the way he does it isn't like some nice clinical trials. He does it by torturing people.
At the same time, he's unhinged enough to be completely calm about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the scariest part.
The delivery of those lines is spectacular. We as the audience is like, that feels like a threat, but nothing he says is threats. It's just, this is what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
You should know this about me.
You're going to find out exactly how dangerous that is.
Right. He's so cold and calculating and just dedicated to his craft that he even, like, when Humperdinck sets the machine up to its highest setting, he's upset about that.
No, not 50.
He's like, that's ruining my studies. Why?
I don't need that data.
Yeah.
That's where I started.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, he's not upset that it's an outrageous act or that Wesley is being hurt. He's just like, that.
Come on, I was working on that.
Yeah. So, yeah. But it is really hard to pick a favorite character in Princess Bride because all of the characters are so great and they're so interdependent because a lot of what is great about them is how they interact. And most of the characters interact with all the other characters. It's not a huge cast. Again, there are the weaklings like Buttercup and Humperdinck, but even so, I don't think that they're terrible. They're just not exciting.
The problem with the two of them is they're less focused on as characters and more focused on as part of the plot.
Right.
And we do still have those great moments with them, like Buttercup's whole dream sequence with the old lady.
Yeah.
That's a really cool character moment that a lot of movies really wouldn't have bothered with for a princess character, realistically.
And they still have good lines of dialogue, and especially you can see with Buttercup a lot of determination and dedication from the beginning, like when she jumps out of the boat when kidnapped, and she's still defiant even when she has to be rescued by Fezzik from the eels, and all the way up to how defiant she is with calling out Humperdinck and things like that. So there's stuff there. Also in the terms of how messed up the villain is of Humperdinck. You know, he's talking about how moving it will be to strangle his wife on his wedding night. And he just finds that so amusing. And the casual nature, how he talks about the 500th anniversary to plan, his wife to murder, and Gilder to frame.
Yeah, to frame for him.
He's swamped.
Just so matter of fact in all of these. Well, I mean, I guess that the 500th anniversary is fine.
That's
the other two.
The other.
Perhaps a bit more extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot to the film's credit. I do think of those two as the weakest characters, even though, you'll have characters like Vizzini. Vizzini's only in the first, third of the film, but he's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
A lot of that is the performance, to be fair. It's phenomenal. And, Miracle Max and Valerie as well.
Very
small role, but amazingly performed, and just a solid scene the whole time they're there.
Even characters who are extraordinarily minor that you probably don't even know their name, Yellen. I didn't know his name until I read the script. And yet still, as a child, I quoted his lines like, "Oh, you mean this kid?" It's still so quotable. And he's not even a character. There's nothing there. He's just a person.
You could have just called him, like, Captain.
Yeah,
something.
Exactly. And yet,
door guard.
Yeah. Well, and the ancient boor. I mean, quoting her all the time too, just shouting "boo." It's so quotable, and it's not like there is one character that is the quotable or good character or well-written character. I was actually thinking Wesley's portrayed as a pirate. He is a pirate, and I just don't typically think of him in that context of pirates. But again, during the reading, Dave was Wesley, and you had looked like a Pirates of the Caribbean mask. Yeah. I don't know if it was just a generic version, but, like if you compare it to the Pirates of the Caribbean, Jack Sparrow is the one with the good lines. Some other people are quotable.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few from Barbossa that I know.
Right, Barbossa is very quotable too. Barbossa is well written, but those are the two well-written, quotable characters, whereas the other characters taper off much more quickly.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything from Will or Elizabeth.
They try.
There's moments, but I don't know that they have any really strong quotes.
And so it's just Princess Bride is very, very consistent with its quality of writing.
From start to end.
Yeah.
And you talk to a random person.
Yeah.
And you mention the Princess Bride, they're either going to say the anybody want a peanut thing, or they're going to say as you wish.
Mm-hmm.
Or inconceivable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My brother found a game where somebody is supposed to mention a movie and then everybody has to come up with a quote from that movie independently, and you get points if you come up with the same quote. And we're like, we'll do great at this. But then Princess Bride, there's no way that you'll do that because every line is a quotable line.
Yeah, you could.
But, like if you do Empire Strikes Back, everybody will be, I am your father, or something like that.
Isn't even the line, which is my favorite part of that quote.
But that's, again, the testament to the writing.
I think everything just fits so well in the movie. Like you mentioned the Zoo of Death. And thinking about it, they could have attempted it. But I really start to wonder, how would that have affected the pacing of the film?
Yeah, because that's a fairly long chunk.
Yeah.
And I feel like you don't need anything extra to prove that Fezzik's a giant brute, but a fighter, or that Inigo can, swashbuckle his way through. Mm-hmm. You already have sort of seen these as evidence, so you don't need more proof.
Mm-hmm.
Just them being able to just go to the torture chamber and free Wesley is just a nice, all right, transition and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when the payoff isn't, some grand rescue. It's they take his nearly dead body out, and I think it's stuff like that, and just the dialogue, everything flows very well. I can't think of something in the movie that's just like, oh, that was weird.
Yeah.
I mean, intentionally so with the kind of unusual size.
Oh my god.
That's great.
I don't think they exist. And then
just somebody threw a big
that
dummy at him.
Somebody just threw a stuffed toy at the man.
Yeah.
And
it was great.
And it brutalized. As a kid, it was like that, I think even going back now, I'd still be like, yeah, that looks more realistic than the new Jurassic Park movies. Just there it is.
And there's a very important value in practical effects.
Yeah.
No matter how bad a practical effect looks, it still looks real because it's an object in space.
And you can't really stab a CGI rat.
Not convincingly.
No. To that point, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, edit it down, there's no single scene that comes to mind where it's like, oh, you could cut that out and it would be fine. even, like, again, when editing down for the reading we did at the library, the readings, we try to keep them about an hour long. We ended up this reading being an hour and 15 minutes, so a little bit longer just because it was so hard to cut things down. Even what we did cut down, some of the readers actually protested that I cut out certain lines and certain bits because they were so loved. So it's really hard to find anything superfluous.
That's a rarity in films and in books as well. There's plenty of things, in Jurassic Park. How important is the lawyer at all, other than the highlight of him is getting eaten on the toilet? Other than that, the character brought nothing really.
He is there to die first.
He's there to be annoying and die.
Yeah, and that's
audience satisfaction.
Yeah, somebody had to die first, and so they made a character which is useless otherwise. I mean, I understand why they do that, but it's better to have characters who have more than one purpose.
Yeah, it's possibly getting into next month's topic there, but it's also a problem in horror where it's like, oh, these characters are completely unlikable.
Yeah.
Just so that I can watch them die later and not feel bad about it.
Yeah.
That's never really worked that well for me.
I've also, the flip side of that I've seen quite a lot, and it annoys me, where I'm like, I know you're trying to make me love this character so that I will care when he dies. But all it is, don't you love him? Don't you love him? And it's like, there's nothing to him other than he's nice. There's not really that case in Princess Bride.
Yeah, every character serves multiple purposes, even if sometimes it's as little as being a weird visual gag or delivering a very good line.
It's like a perfect jigsaw puzzle. You can complete it. It's perfect. If you take one piece away, it doesn't fit
quite as good.
Yeah.
I'm sure talking to people that probably don't care as passionately about the film would tell you, well, you could probably get rid of, the grandpa and the kid.
Yeah, but you can't.
No.
That whole framing device feels so right because then you have that whole, you're getting two stories essentially. So you have that story going on. The story that his grandpa is telling him, but you also have the kid slowly realizing that, okay, this is fun. I like this.
And they weave together.
Yeah.
Like it's the part about the shrieking needles that kind of cut into each other.
They cut.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I read it, but somebody was talking about original plans for the movie. That at the end, once you get the shot of the grandpa and the kid, they kind of pan out. I don't know if they filmed it, but you were supposed to have seen all four of the friends riding on the white horses in the background of the window. But that part, it was either cut or wasn't filmed, but that was one of the intentional parts that they wanted, was to have that ultimate tie-in.
While you could take out the framing device, it would diminish the movie.
Yeah.
So much of my memories of that film is because of that scene. That was one of the movies that if I was homesick, that was the VHS I put in. Because it just felt right. It was somebody reading me a story while I was sick.
Especially the soothing sounds of Columbo. That's how you fall asleep.
Yeah.
Can't beat them.
I won't know the names of the actor, maybe you will, but the clergyman, do you know who that is? He's a famous comedian. You could say it is even that isn't necessary to the film, but it's completely necessary to the film. And he's so famous, and I will always know him as that. And whenever I hear him speaking normally, I think it's wrong.
Did you forget?
Yeah, something's wrong.
Some of our friends got married earlier in the year, and their priest started the ceremony exactly for marriage. They did the first two lines and brought everybody down.
Yeah,
that's great.
IMDb has it rated at 8.0. That's ridiculous. That's absurd.
Yeah.
I'm very tempted to just discredit IMDb entirely in terms of ratings from this sole thing.
I mean, there have been a few ratings on IMDb which are just flat out wrong.
And you have to consider that anybody can do it and people will actively be contrarian.
I was prepared to say that I've never met somebody who didn't like this film, but actually very recently I did. He was actually one of the readers we had. Saw it as a child and didn't care for it too much and just never thought to watch it again. Since being in the reading, he said he watched it again and was warming up to it, but still, For the most part, I've never met somebody who didn't
there's
like
always
this.
got to be that one. And I mean, it varies, I'm sure, because, as a kid, I was huge into, like, swords and sorcery and fantasy in general. So, of course, my buddy was like, no, trust me, you'll like this. He basically gave me the pitch, that's on the box. Has giants, fencing, fighting giants, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, all right, fine. Sure enough, like, all of that was really solid. And then it was just funny on top of that, which is impressive because it's not a comedy film, but it is fun.
It's a strange line that it walks, where it is both a parody and absolutely serious.
Keeping itself, playing it straight while it's sort of parodying.
If people are aware of Galaxy Quest, that's the only other film I know that walks that same line, and they're both two amazing movies, so definitely watch them both.
Walk Hard goes a little too far into the parody. It never takes itself seriously enough. But yeah, Galaxy Quest is absolutely, this is us making fun of Star Trek, but also we really love Star Trek, so we want to do this well.
Yeah. And the amount of dedication and attention to detail in Princess Bride and trying to make sure that it is a good action adventure movie comes through very well. One of the favorite parts is I am a fencer, and movies, as a general rule, have absolutely horrendous fencing in them. I mean, it stands to reason. These are actors, they've never fenced before. Stage fencing has never been real fencing, and never will be, so it's a little unfair to judge them on that scale. Now, the fencing in Princess Bride is still stage fencing, but it is some of the best stage fencing.
The fight on the stairwell. That's something you very rarely see, because that's very hard to do. Even with it being, stage fencing, that's still very difficult to perform.
And besides the part where they swing they do the somersaults on, they all did their own fighting. Yeah. And Wesley actually had either broken toe or broken foot during parts of that scene. Andre the Giant got a golf cart during one of the off days of filming. Was driving it around and kept coming back to Carrie Elwes, saying, "Hey, you want to get on and ride?" It's like, no, I don't want to do it. He kept coming back to him 3 days. Came back the fourth day. Finally convinced him to get on. He got his foot caught between the bottom of the golf cart and the brake, and he couldn't move it, and it broke. Whatever it broke was on his right foot. So if you focus in on the foot, there's times where he's on it, but it's completely shattered. Yeah. He's going for it. So, just adds more credibility. Mm-hmm.
I'm always surprised that he was not a bigger star after that.
Every once in a while when he appears, he's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Again,
no oversaturation of the market.
Yeah. He was really solid in, Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
Did you ever see the 90s Jungle Book?
No.
Oh, yeah, he is in the...
He is. He plays one of the villains. And he's amazing. That movie's incredible. The movie's phenomenal.
Everything I've seen him in, he's been absolutely solid. He never really made it to the upper echelon of that.
Ella Enchanted, too, as the villain.
Yep.
He was a reoccurring character in Psych.
Yep.
And every single episode was like, here we go. Yeah. And everyone was a banger. Every single one.
Yeah. I don't know if he realized this ahead of time, but he looks exactly like the Errol Flynn type actor. And I don't know if he knew that ahead of time and is like, I will be a parody of this since I already look at it, or if it just so happened. But he is great for that, and that's why he was cast in this role, is because the casting director saw him in something and was like, he has the comedic timing, but he also looks like the stereotypical hero.
Like the hero.
Maybe it stems from just everybody in Princess Bride, but the dialogue from that is so quotable, and I think every single actor in it, wherever they reappear, has at least a role that's just as quotable.
Again, Max being Billy Crystal, he's had a massive career in comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And Valerie, Carol Kane, currently in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and phenomenal. The actor who plays Vizzini.
Yeah,
he's been in so many things.
And he always feels like Vizzini, which is great.
Yeah.
A lot of these other people,
Wallace Shawn.
Yeah. You see them pop up here and there. It's always a fun treat, but with Wallace Shawn, it's like, that's just his speaking voice, I guess.
Yeah. There's a bit of trivia that I think is more common knowledge, so I'm not sure if I'll be telling anybody anything new, but this is podcast first, so here we go. He heard that he was the third choice for the role, the first choice being Danny DeVito, which I like.
Kind of fun, though.
I like Danny DeVito, but I'm so glad that it's Wallace Shawn. Anyway, Danny DeVito is a huge name, was a huge name then too, and so he had this incredible fear that he was never going to live up to the expectations, and he was panicked every single day of shooting that he was just going to get fired. Every scene he would be like, well, how would Danny DeVito play this scene? And tried to copy that as best he could. The first day of the table readings, he's like, I can't do a Sicilian accent. I don't know if I can even do this role. And they're like, Vicini talks just like you do. And it's true. He does talk exactly like that. And that's the only way Vicini can ever sound.
Exactly. Yeah, that's, sometimes you come in, you do a role, and no one's ever going to be able to do it better.
No.
It's definitely one of those cases.
Again, going back to the idea of different fan castings for remakes, I've seen one that a lot of people said they liked where Tom Hiddleston played Vicini. And I'm like, no, that's terrible. Because he's not Wallace Shawn.
Now I'm kind of like, no, just get Danny DeVito this time.
Yeah. Or get Wallace Shawn. He's still around.
Yeah. I just feel like the disconnect. Like, I'm trying to picture Danny DeVito in that role. I don't think Danny DeVito could do Vicini in the same way that Wallace Shawn could not do Frank Reynolds.
Yeah, it's fair. It would just feel off no matter what you did there.
And in that other universe, they probably have switched roles because Danny DeVito's probably became like a very highly respected, suddenly changed.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would watch Always Sunny then, because I don't think it would be any good.
I'm the trash man.
Well, it would be so weird. Oh, I don't like that's oh.
Yeah.
And let that be a reminder, everyone, trust the casting director. Most of the time.
Most of the time. There are some odd choices.
There have been some bad calls.
Yeah.
Look at you, Ryan Reynolds, Green Lantern.
Well, and
I usually say Chris Pratt Mario.
Also, just like the first choice is like the Nick Cage Superman, which fortunately we were spared from, but that was talked about. I don't want to see that.
I mean, I do.
I do now.
Not in a real movie. It's something.
I want to see that because it would be so amazingly weird, and there's value in that too.
That was also The Lord of the Rings, one of the first choices for Galadriel was Uma Thurman, and I'm like,
that would have felt weird.
I don't want that. I really do not.
Weird. In fairness, that is one of many films where I feel like the best choice for a lot of their actors is get somebody that is as little known as possible.
Yeah. Or, a lot of the actors were really well known, like the actor for Gimli, but you had so many prosthetics, a big, huge beard. You didn't recognize. I mean, I loved Indiana Jones growing up. I didn't recognize that when I watched Lord of the Rings for the first time. I didn't realize that he was from Indiana Jones. So if you're going to do somebody big, make him unrecognizable.
Yeah. And maybe that's also part of why this worked. I mean, Billy Crystal probably would have been a pretty big name at 87.
Yeah.
A lot of the other ones were kind of... If you weren't a fan of wrestling, you probably had never heard of or seen Andre the Giant.
Right.
I don't know when his big fight with Hulk Hogan was, so he may have been a household name just from that at this point. But again, even still, if nobody in your family cared about wrestling, you wouldn't have known that whole thing.
I didn't know he was a wrestler for the longest time. And I was like, oh, the guy from Princess Bride? Really? It made sense, but, for the longest, it was just, oh, yeah, he's that really great giant in the movie.
Yeah.
But I also feel like with Billy Crystal especially, is he's probably one of the biggest names in that film, but they use him sparingly. And same for Peter Falk, actually. Yeah. Both of them, huge.
Falk would have been really big by then.
But both of them used as characters that are fairly minor, important to the story, but fairly minor.
Billy Crystal was coming off, I forget the exact year, but he was coming off Spinal Tap.
Oh, wow.
Filming that. He was waiter or mine waiter or something in that movie. And his part was even smaller than it was here, but it kind of set him up. That guy's got something going.
Yeah.
This just makes me feel even more so. It's like, you can't remake this, at least not live action. Trying to replace these people is nearly impossible in a lot of cases.
The one, not exception, I don't want to say it's an exception, because I still agree to that 100%, but the one time where I was intrigued by an alternate casting was actually with what's called the homemade movie of The Princess Bride, where they did over the lockdown. They had a bunch of actors recreate a scene or two from The Princess Bride, and they stitched them all together to make a full-length movie. But they just did it in, like, their backyards with whatever costume they had. One scene where I was like, I actually liked that casting was they had Andy Serkis as Count Rugen and Elijah Wood as Humperdinck.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, I would see that. I would see that.
To be fair, you put those two in just about anything, and I'm probably going to be at least interested enough to go see.
I mean, it's a slightly different take, but Andy Serkis 100% can do that sophisticated, sinister. Even when he's just talking normally, he's
a little bit sinister, naturally.
And Elijah Wood would be a slightly different take on Humperdinck, but just such innocence in his face. He looks so young and innocent and pure, like he could never be a villain, and yet that would be so perfect.
The few times he's played villains, he's done very well, and part of it is just that it's, you look at him as, that's Elijah Wood.
Exactly.
I can't be afraid of Elijah Wood.
He had 16 lives in Spy Kids 3, got hit once and lost them all. How can you be afraid of that?
Exactly.
But that's kind of a credit to the Humperdinck character, though, because I think one of my favorite things about that is it goes through quite a bit of the story before it's kind of revealed, he's evil.
He's behind basically everything that's happened.
Right. At first they go, no, he's normal. And they go, oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Because
it's this partial reveal. Because it's like, at first it's like, oh, he's just kind of pompous and...
and trying to find his future wife who's been kidnapped.
And so gradually, and then all of a sudden he's just like, oh no, he's a horrible psychopath. Oh.
Even when he's taken prisoner or whatever, and you're thinking, okay. I mean, I get it, because it's
he's a pirate.
Yeah, he's a pirate.
He's the dread pirate Roberts.
Yeah.
Buttercup fumbles the bag saying, take him to his pirate ship. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. She starts off, she's like, he's a sailor on the pirate ship Revenge. Like, why did you
call him pirate?
It's like, why? Just say he's a sailor on the ship called Revenge. Or don't even mention the name of the ship.
Don't mention the name Revenge, because that's the dread pirate Roberts' ship.
He's a pirate. He's a sailor on a ship that's right over there. Honestly, just let him go.
If I've learned anything, if a ship has Revenge in the name, probably pirates.
Yeah, good chance.
That's such a weird... Because that's it's funny, because his plan initially is essentially Bezic, Vizzini, and Inigo are supposed to take her to the border to be killed so he can start his war. Mm-hmm. He didn't even really want to do the wedding part of the plan initially.
Right.
He had to redo it when Wesley showed up.
Yeah.
Weddings are expensive, and you can't put all that into, the war machine.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, because assuming Wesley didn't show up, Vizzini would probably be fine with that plan, but I don't think Inigo or Bezic would have gone through with that.
Well, I mean, they were already starting to show their discontent when they found out that it involved killing her. So
it's just like, maybe just hire better goons.
Yeah.
To be fair, I mean, everything would have been fine, except that, Wesley is just kind of good at everything.
I mean, yeah.
Which could be a criticism. But at the same time, it's also, this is a story about princess and swashbuckling.
Yeah.
You're allowed to have the fun.
Hero is supposed to be good. And even then, as good at everything as he is, he still kind of fumbles a lot.
Yeah.
He's human.
Not to the point where he's just, gets everything handed to him either. Obviously, the most, if you want to go the OP character type trope, The easiest example is he can best Inigo, who is supposedly the greatest swordsman. But when he comes to Fezzik, it's not like, oh, I'm a better swordsman than the best swordsman, and I'm a better fighter than the giant. He is not. He is weaker. He is...
So basically Fezzik is like, look, I could kill you from here,
right,
but I don't want to.
Yeah. And even then, it's like, okay, we'll wrestle. Wesley would lose if he wasn't smart about it. It's not that, oh, he's such an amazing wrestler or he's so amazingly strong. So it's not that he's just better at everything than everyone. He's really, really good in a lot of areas and plays to his strengths.
They stress that it's like, oh, he out sword fights Inigo, he beats Fezzik in a contest of strength, and then he outwits Vizzini. You could almost change the last bits because, he fights smarter, not harder against Fezzik. And
cheated.
Well...
I mean, he set the rules, and it's a stupid contest that Vizzini shouldn't have...
Yeah.
Because even if only one cup was poisoned, that's not a battle of wits, because it takes no real wits on Wesley's part. Yeah. It takes all the wits on the other part. So it's not a battle of wits, really. Well, I could put 2 cups out right now, and it would be really hard for you to guess, whereas putting poison in one of those would be really easy for me.
But that's kind of like the only winning move is not to play.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so
the case there.
He messed up when he said, I'll do it, and then did it.
Yeah.
And you could argue that training yourself to resist poison, that could be a test of strength. But he was able to resist it because he built up an immunity.
Yeah.
So
it's more physical.
He outwitted the giant and in a show of strength.
He beat Vizzini in a show of strength.
Yeah. Doesn't sound quite as impressive.
No,
but
it is more accurate.
Yeah. Then again, outsmarting Vizzini doesn't sound too hard either.
It is one of those odd things where we are told Vizzini is very smart, but we never see Vizzini be very smart.
Yeah.
It's more like he just kind of handles everything.
Yeah.
So he thinks he's the brains.
He is smarter than the 2 people who work for him.
And even that's a little debatable. He is more organized and proactive than them.
Yeah.
Even later on in the film, when Count Rugen is revealed to be the 6-fingered man to Inigo, he doesn't even try to come up with a plan. He's like, I don't want to. Let's find the man in black. They're just not dedicated to that. So, I don't know if he is smart or not.
It is one of those odd things that's like, from what we see, he's at least learned.
Yeah.
Because he knows what iocane powder is. He's at least aware of other
Plato,
philosophers,
Aristotle, and Socrates.
So he is at least somewhat learned, but whether or not he's actually intelligent is an entirely different story.
But if you put all 3 of them together, they make up the perfect henchperson.
Yes.
Basically, yeah.
Yes.
The 3 of them would be the most effective version of Team Rocket or the trio.
Yes.
Going way back to the beginning, the thoughts of a sequel or a continuation of the story, where do you guys stand on that? Do you think it's necessary? I mean, would you like to see that?
For me, I would not like to see that. I'm kind of picky about remakes and reboots and all of that. I would not like to see that. I like the idea of certain actors and actresses that we've talked about here. It would be kind of fun, but I don't want to see an official, like, Princess Brad's coming out in December 2024. I don't want to see that. It's perfect. Yeah. From acting, writing, directing, music.
Yeah.
Like,
we didn't even really talk about that, but it's phenomenal.
Perfect. It's the package. I would not want to see that redone.
And I agree. It is a very complete story. You can tell when a story is done, and it's very much done. No, Humperdinck isn't dead, and so what happens in the chapters of the sequel that were written is he immediately sends men out to chase them, and a few arrows hit some of them, so they're wounded and have to go away and hide. And logically, yes, that makes sense, because he's right there, and he's the crown prince of Florin. He can certainly expend resources to chase them. But I don't need to see that. The story is still over. We know they escaped. We don't need to see that they escaped to know that they escaped. Or to see what trials they overcome to know that they lived happily ever after. The story is quite solidly over. As for remakes, again, I'm not looking forward to any remakes. If I heard that one was coming out, I would look into it, and depending, again, if they said Andy Serkis and Elijah Wood, then I would be like, all right, I will watch it. But even still, it's not going to replace the one that exists.
This is my life's work.
Delicious. Well, I don't know that I necessarily care too much about a proper sequel. I would love to see more of just some of the weird stuff that is mentioned and never really... this is a world where there are shrieking eels and other weird little fantasy things. I'm always more fascinated in world building.
Yeah.
And I do also think that, we could do something interesting with either when Wesley was the Dread Pirate Roberts or if Inigo became the Dread Pirate Roberts afterwards. Basically, I just want somebody that isn't Disney to make a film about pirates, I think, as a part of this.
In some ways, I don't even want any sort of spin-offs or anything in the world. I agree. I really like the world, too. But what I would want in terms of spin-offs wouldn't be movies, would be in other expanded materials like games or something like that.
Yeah. Be really easy to make into a sort of a tabletop RPG.
Yeah, exactly. Something to expand it that way.
We have that war eminently brewing with Galder. There's definitely a campaign setting here.
And there are a few games out there, including, I recently found out about a video game. It's very much for kids, but they have 5 different chapters to it, and one of them is the Fire Swamp. And it's the typical 2D scroller platform game where you have to jump from different platforms and avoid the quicksand, or lightning sand, and there's rodents of unusual size trying to kill you and flame spurts that you have to jump over. And it's that's where I want the expansion for. That's things like that. Again, it was very much a kid's game, but if you made it more mature and explore the Fire Swamp, this game added new things to the Fire Swamp. They had, fire vines or something like that, or something. I don't remember exactly. But more things were flame-oriented, so...
Makes sense.
Yeah, this Fire Swamp.
They feel there were less fire than there should be in the Fire Swamp.
Less fire, more swamp in the Fire Swamp. They did strangely have flying ROUSs, which I wasn't a fan of that edition. They just had bat wings and were rats with bat wings.
You needed to have a flying enemy type.
Yeah. But still, expanding that world through different mediums like that, I think that's the way to go if you want more Princess Bride stuff.
I think I could get behind just kind of like how Lord of the Rings does it, where it's just after the story, here's 2 sentences of what those characters did. And Legolas and Gimli ventured around until they went to the Grey Havens, and, or just Inigo sailed off on a pirate ship, or Fezzik went back to Greenland or something, or, just
found employment.
Right, or, did they go back to the farm? Did they do, just that. I don't need a whole...
Yeah.
I think I agree. I don't need, the horsemen were after them or something. But just, maybe Humperdinck went back to plotting. Maybe he called the whole thing off.
I assume there is still inevitably a war with Galder. He's really desperate for that.
Yeah, you would imagine.
Maybe Yellen always seemed like, I don't know, a straight man that wasn't in... He was never in anything. Yeah. Maybe he found out about it, and maybe they... arrested. I don't know. There doesn't have to be. There doesn't need to be extra. But I think if there was going to be an additional thing, that's kind of...
Just sort of a...
supplemental.
Less of a sequel, more of an epilogue.
Yeah. I think I'd be okay with that.
That's just about our time.
Is there anything we didn't touch on that you guys are really, really aching to speak about?
For me, it doesn't have to be a full, detailed discussion, but if you are listening, check out the music. Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits wrote the end song, the main theme, but also all of the music throughout the entire movie. And if you take the music away, it's the movie, but it's not the same movie. Yeah. If you add the music in there...
That soundtrack is
and it's walking that balance that we talked about earlier between campy and serious.
Yeah.
The music with the sword fight It's not the same sword fight without that.
That is actually what my thing to add in was the music. There's the main theme and the songs that you typically think of in relation to it, which are, an acoustic guitar. But most of the songs, I don't know the technical terms for the genre, but the only thing I would think of is 80s video game music.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a very like, and it's like, this kind of music where it's like,
synthesizers all over it.
Yeah.
And just
like a medieval synthesizer.
Exactly.
King's Quest.
Yeah.
It does have a very King's Quest.
And it just encapsulates that whole era, that whole genre, and the whole movie. It's just...
And looking at it, the movie starts, fade in from black, you hear the sounds of the baseball game.
Mm-hmm.
The story has that video game music element, another tie-in from beginning to end.
Yeah, again, I would really like Princess Bride video game that wasn't for kids. It's something
honestly, now I can't stop thinking about a point-and-click adventure a la King's Quest. It would be kind of perfect for that. It's not quite as tongue-in-cheek as Monkey Island, but it's kind of close.
It's got to exist. That sounds too perfect.
If it doesn't, get on it.
Yeah, somebody... But even, something like those Lord of the Rings computer games where you play as one of the characters and you go through the things and you fight all these orcs and that sort of stuff. If you had that style of game where you can rotate through the characters, you play it through in story mode and you're like, okay, this is a scene for Wesley, you play it through. But then you go back and you're like, I'm going to be Fezzik through the fire swamp. Or,
fight with Kemper.
Exactly,
It's got a lot different.
Yeah,
a lot quicker. Just throws a rock at him.
Yeah.
Fight's over.
Not even that. Just as a tribute, just have him do wrestling, WWE moves on him, just like backbreaker or something.
Yeah, I would play that.
Yeah, it could be fun. Thank you both so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this has been a podcast of the Lansdowne Public Library. Keep your ears out for next month's episode, which should be...
appropriate for October. Something a little on the spookier side. I don't know why I wiggled my fingers. It's completely audio.
Spooky fingers.
Completely audio format.
They'll hear the spooky.
Exactly. You'll get the emphasis there.
As you can tell, we are already excited, and we're not quite sure exactly where it's going to go, but we can guarantee it's going to be a fun one. October topics are usually the best. But until we get to the October episode, Jeff, where can people find out more about our podcast and if they'd like to be on it?
Well, if you head on over to lansdowne.org/podcasts, that has, I believe, all of our shows to date, as well as a green register here button. So if you have a topic that you'd like to discuss with us, you can click there. There's a small form to fill out, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.